10 unsolved cases of students vanishing from their schools. When parents send their children off to school, they not only need faith that the institution will provide them with a good education, but that they'll keep them safe. After all, they are entrusting these schools to watch over their child for several hours per day. Unfortunately, however, sometimes parents will send their child off to school and wind up never seeing them again. 1. Roger Ellison. The morning of Tuesday, February 10, 1981 began like any other morning for 17-year-old Roger Ellison of Eckerd, Colorado. Although somewhat of a loner by nature, the Cedar High School senior was a very popular straight-A student. He was also a gifted skier who had just paid an entry fee to compete in an Aspen ski race the following weekend. He took the bus as usual to school and arrived without incident. He got his book from his locker, which he shared with his friend and classmate Mitch Coleman. He told Mitch he'd see him in class. This was the last time anyone ever saw or spoke to Roger Ellison. He never attended a single class that day and no one ever saw him leave the school building. As was generally the case of missing teens at the time, police dismissed Ernest and Evelyn Ellison's concerns about their son's whereabouts. Besides, he would be turning 18 in another month. They stated that Roger probably just ran away with a girlfriend and would turn up. But the Ellisons knew that Roger wasn't dating anyone at the time and was a homebody. When he wasn't at school, skiing, or working odd jobs around town for extra cash, he was at home with his parents. He was the youngest of 5 and the only one still living at home. Ernest died only a few months later, many believe from a broken heart. Evelyn devoted all of her time and energy to finding her son. Just before her husband's death, they had put up an $8,000 reward for anyone who could lead them to Roger. When it became obvious that Roger didn't voluntarily vanish, police began to seriously investigate. They got some interesting information from a teacher at Cedar High. John Pash, Roger's social studies teacher, reported that Roger had submitted a written assignment for his class which said he was having personal problems and was contemplating suicide. Pash also called the Ellisons to tell them this, but he has never publicly produced a copy of said assignment. The Ellisons and Roger's coach state that he was in good spirits and was never even depressed, let alone suicidal. When he vanished, they began to view Pash with understandable suspicion. Pash lived next door to the school and Roger, as well as many other students, often popped in to pick up or drop off assignments. It was rumored that Pash had had inappropriate dealings with some of his students, drugs, booze, sex, etc. He moved away and sold the house in 1984. Years later, a classmate of Roger suggested that Roger may be buried somewhere on that property, and law enforcement took a look. The classmate stated that they witnessed Pash digging in his yard right around the time Roger vanished. Although they found some anomalies in the garage floor, they elected not to dig it up. Their ground-penetrating radar tools found nothing. As of 2014, Pash is still considered a person of interest. There were several false leads over the next few years. A 1983 tip said that Roger was working at a tree farm. In 1985, someone said he was attending college in New York. One lead in 1987 stated that Roger was a drug addict named Little Billy who lived in a California commune, while another tip that same year placed him at a Pittsburgh singles bar. A woman in Florida called authorities in 1988 to say that she gave birth to a child fathered by a drifter named Roger J. Ellis, who was a dead ringer for Roger Ellison. In 1989, someone alleged that a man Andy Young was actually Roger. Evelyn Ellison died in February 1992, just a few days prior to the 11th anniversary of her son's disappearance. On April 7, 1994, Roger's case was shown on the Sally Jesse Raphael show. 2 different callers from Colorado's Grand Junction area notified authorities and said they recognized Roger after seeing his photo on the broadcast. One woman even went so far as to say Roger looked like a friend of her brother's. Both calls came in the same day the show aired. Again, neither panned out. The case appeared to have been blown wide open in the fall of 1998. A man on his deathbed notified Delta County Sheriff's detectives that he wanted to clear his conscience. He stated that in 1981, he and a friend were deer poaching in the woods when they saw Roger Ellison. They stated that Roger's hands were tied up and that he was being led away at gunpoint. After Roger disappeared from their line of vision, they heard 2 gunshots. Both this witness and his friend passed polygraph tests. The man they identified as being Roger's assailant had moved away from the area many years earlier, and has never been conclusively linked to the disappearance. 2. Bianca Levin. Bianca was a 5th grade student at Elias House School in her hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut in 2001. She arrived for classes during the morning hours of November 7, 2001, and told her friends and a teacher that her uncle was taking her shopping during the day. She invited friends to come along, but they declined. Witnesses told authorities that Bianca got into a vehicle at 8:30 a.m. before classes began. The vehicle was an older model two-tone brown and tan van with tinted windows. The exterior was in poor condition and it appeared to have been sanded in several areas. A photo of a similar van and a sketch of its driver are posted below this case summary. Bianca has never been heard from again. The driver is described as a Hispanic male, approximately 20 to 30 years old. Witnesses said he stood 5'8" to 5'11" with an average build. The individual had black curly hair styled in a short afro with long sideburns and a beard, brown eyes, a prominent nose and scratches on both of his cheeks. He was wearing a long-sleeved blue pullover shirt with Gap imprinted on the front and along the right sleeve, Fubu jeans with an image of the cartoon character Fat Albert on the right rear pocket, and scrut brown Timberland boots. The man made no attempt to conceal his face from witnesses. Bianca's classmates believed that the unidentified man was her uncle, and didn't interfere when she entered his van. Her family members told authorities Bianca does not in fact have an uncle, however, and none of her relatives owned a van similar to the vehicle involved in her abduction. School officials received widespread criticism for their handling of Bianca's disappearance. Administrators did not realize Bianca was missing until the day after her abduction. Her teacher counted her absent. Stronger security measures and new attendance policies were put into place after Bianca disappeared. The teacher who heard Bianca's statements about plans with her uncle on the day of her abduction was suspended with pay. Bianca's mother believes she is alive, but had she declared legally dead so she could bring a wrongful death lawsuit against the school. Bianca resided with her mother and stepfather, Carmelita Torres and Angelo Garcia, in Bridgeport at the time of her disappearance. Bianca's family noticed that she was missing at approximately 4:30 p.m. They initially believed that she may have been at a friend's house and did not remember to call them. When Bianca failed to return home by 8:30 p.m., her mother called the authorities. She often went to the homes of relatives other than her parents after school, and once disappeared overnight but turned up safe at a friend's house. Bianca's mother and father had an amicable relationship at the time of Bianca's disappearance. Neither is suspected of involvement in her case. No suspects have been identified in Bianca's disappearance. In late April 2002, police announced that they wanted to question Jason Gonzalez, 20, as a possible witness in Bianca's case. He had lived in Bridgeport but left about a month after Bianca's disappearance. Authorities characterized him as an acquaintance of Bianca. A photograph of him is posted below this case summary. In November 2003, Gonzalez, whose real name is Jason Lara, called the police department to deny that he knew anything about Bianca's disappearance. The police traced his call to Fort Myers, Florida, and arrested him for second-degree forgery. The arrest is not related to Bianca's case, but authorities used it as an opportunity to bring him up to Bridgeport for interrogation about Bianca. Investigators began to question him intensely about Bianca's disappearance. He resembles the sketch of Bianca's presumed abductor, and one of his friends owns a van similar to the one Bianca was seen getting into. Bianca's loved one stated Lara was her secret boyfriend and she had been seen kissing him. But Lara's fiancé says the allegations are false and are the result of a feud between the Lara and Lebrin families. Lara has a criminal record. He was sentenced to 7 years in 1998 for carjacking, but was released from prison early. He was eventually cleared of suspicion in Bianca's disappearance. He had an alibi for the time she disappeared. He pleaded guilty to a charge of interfering with a police officer and received a suspended sentence in December 2003. Bianca is described as having an outgoing personality with high self-esteem. She was a very good student in 2001, and it's uncharacteristic of her to skip school, as she apparently did the day of her disappearance. In 2001, her hobbies included dancing and singing to all types of music, as well as shopping at Milford Mall and Trumbull Mall near her family's residence. She also had a pet hamster named Nina. Elias House School is now closed, and Bianca's father now lives in Florida, but her grandmother still lives in the same house as she did in 2001, and her entire family hopes she will be found. Her case is unsolved. 2. Bianca Levin. Bianca was a 5th grade student at Elias House School in her hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut in 2001. She arrived for classes during the morning hours of November 7, 2001, and told her friends and a teacher that her uncle was taking her shopping during the day. She invited friends to come along, but they declined. Witnesses told authorities that Bianca got into a vehicle at 8:30 a.m. before classes began. The vehicle was an older model two-tone brown and tan van with tinted windows. The exterior was in poor condition and it appeared to have been sanded in several areas. A photo of a similar van and a sketch of its driver are posted below this case summary. Bianca has never been heard from again. The driver is described as a Hispanic male, approximately 20 to 30 years old. Witnesses said he stood 5'8" to 5'11" with an average build. The individual had black curly hair styled in a short afro with long sideburns and a beard, brown eyes, a prominent nose and scratches on both of his cheeks. He was wearing a long-sleeved blue pullover shirt with Gap imprinted on the front and along the right sleeve, Fubu jeans with an image of the cartoon character Fat Albert on the right rear pocket, and scrut brown Timberland boots. The man made no attempt to conceal his face from witnesses. Bianca's classmates believed that the unidentified man was her uncle, and didn't interfere when she entered his van. Her family members told authorities Bianca does not in fact have an uncle, however, and none of her relatives owned a van similar to the vehicle involved in her abduction. School officials received widespread criticism for their handling of Bianca's disappearance. Administrators did not realize Bianca was missing until the day after her abduction. Her teacher counted her absent. Stronger security measures and new attendance policies were put into place after Bianca disappeared. The teacher who heard Bianca's statements about plans with her uncle on the day of her abduction was suspended with pay. Bianca's mother believes she is alive, but had she declared legally dead so she could bring a wrongful death lawsuit against the school. Bianca resided with her mother and stepfather, Carmelita Torres and Angelo Garcia, in Bridgeport at the time of her disappearance. Bianca's family noticed that she was missing at approximately 4:30 p.m. They initially believed that she may have been at a friend's house and did not remember to call them. When Bianca failed to return home by 8:30 p.m., her mother called the authorities. She often went to the homes of relatives other than her parents after school, and once disappeared overnight but turned up safe at a friend's house. Bianca's mother and father had an amicable relationship at the time of Bianca's disappearance. Neither is suspected of involvement in her case. No suspects have been identified in Bianca's disappearance. In late April 2002, police announced that they wanted to question Jason Gonzalez, 20, as a possible witness in Bianca's case. He had lived in Bridgeport but left about a month after Bianca's disappearance. Authorities characterized him as an acquaintance of Bianca. A photograph of him is posted below this case summary. In November 2003, Gonzalez, whose real name is Jason Lara, called the police department to deny that he knew anything about Bianca's disappearance. The police traced his call to Fort Myers, Florida, and arrested him for second-degree forgery. The arrest is not related to Bianca's case, but authorities used it as an opportunity to bring him up to Bridgeport for interrogation about Bianca. Investigators began to question him intensely about Bianca's disappearance. He resembles the sketch of Bianca's presumed abductor, and one of his friends owns a van similar to the one Bianca was seen getting into. Bianca's loved one stated Lara was her secret boyfriend and she had been seen kissing him. But Lara's fiancé says the allegations are false and are the result of a feud between the Lara and Levin families. Lara has a criminal record. He was sentenced to 7 years in 1998 for carjacking, but was released from prison early. He was eventually cleared of suspicion in Bianca's disappearance. He had an alibi for the time she disappeared. He pleaded guilty to a charge of interfering with a police officer and received a suspended sentence in December 2003. Bianca is described as having an outgoing personality with high self-esteem. She was a very good student in 2001, and it's uncharacteristic of her to skip school, as she apparently did the day of her disappearance. In 2001, her hobbies included dancing and singing to all types of music, as well as shopping at Milford Mall and Trumbull Mall near her family's residence. She also had a pet hamster named Nina. Elias' house school is now closed, and Bianca's father now lives in Florida, but her grandmother still lives in the same house as she did in 2001, and her entire family hopes she will be found. Her case is unsolved. 4. Sara Kinsler. The 11th anniversary of the disappearance of 14-year-old Sara Elizabeth Kinsler is a painful reminder for her mother. It is very difficult not knowing where she is, Louise Kinsler told the Huffington Post. Somebody out there knows something and I just wish they would come forward. Sara Kinsler was last seen by her parents on May 1, 2001, when her dad dropped her off at Greenville Middle School in her hometown of Greenville, Texas, at approximately 7:20 a.m. It was not until after the school day ended that the Kinslers were notified their daughter had not attended any of her classes. When Louise Kinsler spoke to her daughter's friends, they said her daughter was supposed to skip school with them that day and meet up at nearby East Mount Cemetery. Concerned, Kinsler contacted police and reported the teen missing. Authorities took an article of Sara Kinsler's clothing from the family home and brought a tracking dog to the school. Investigators were able to pick up her scent where she had exited her father's car. The dog followed the scent around the school and to a location 2 blocks away, where it ended in the middle of a street. The dog ran out of scent and I feel like at that point she might have gotten into a vehicle, former Greenville Police Chief Barry Paris said in a May 4, 2001, interview with the Herald Banner. During the course of the investigation, a teen witness told police she thought she saw Sara Kinsler getting into a light blue truck, driven by a white male, at the location where the scent trail ended. The case took a twist on May 7, when Sara Kinsler's boyfriend, 18-year-old Quinlan resident Curtis Wayne Bell, was arrested for aggravated sexual assault of a child. Bell, according to police, was one of the individuals the teen was supposed to meet the day she disappeared. Bell was freed on $50,000 bond. Louise Kinsler said she was aware her daughter had been seeing Bell, but said she did not approve of the relationship and did not allow her daughter to be alone with him. In a diary found after she went missing, her daughter wrote of her love for Bell, and her desire for them to run away and be together. According to Louise Kinsler, her daughter had never run away in the past, and was unprepared to be gone for an extended period of time when she went to school that day. She did not take her purse, extra clothes or any personal belongings, she said. In the weeks that followed, police received tips placing the missing teen in various locations, including a Greenville gas station, where a clerk claimed to recognize her from a missing person flyer. This time, however, police had surveillance footage from the station. She is seen on the video with Bell, Louise Kinsler said. We have it on tape. He initially denied it was her and said it was a different girl. When he was asked about it again later, he denied he was the person in the video. The last sighting of Sara Kinsler, although not confirmed, occurred on December 25, 2001. My neighbors said they saw her in a car in Quinlan, her mother said. They are positive it was her. Authorities were provided with the vehicle's license plate number and traced it to an owner in another town. When police questioned the man, he denied knowing Sara Kinsler, and the lead fizzled. The case quickly went cold. In July 2009, Bell pleaded guilty to a charge of sexual assault of a child. He was sentenced to 60 days in jail and 10 years of deferred adjudication probation. Sometime around the 9-year anniversary of Kinsler's disappearance, her parents found an anonymous note in their mailbox. It didn't say who it was from, Louise Kinsler said. In essence, it told us to speak with a specific individual. The note said if we did, I believe you will find the answers you are looking for. The woman, according to Kinsler, was the ex-wife of a close friend of Bell's, but she denied any knowledge of Sara Kinsler's whereabouts. The Kinslers said they later discovered the identity of the individual who had put the note in their mailbox. After we convinced him to talk, he said he heard our daughter had been killed, and disposed of in a rock quarry that is full of water, Louise Kinsler said. I have begged police to please go look there and nothing has been done. Is the story about Sara Kinsler's demise fact or fiction? Nobody knows yet. One thing is certain though, there have been no confirmed sightings since 2001. Greenville's current police chief, Daniel Buskin, agreed to respond to questions but was unable to do so by press time. As for Bell, he was in the news again last month, when his probation was revoked and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Meanwhile, time has left Louise Kinsler hopeless. "I think someone has done something to her. I do not believe she is alive," she said. "We will have a balloon release today to mark the anniversary of her disappearance," she added. "The balloon release will be a celebration of her life and the time we had with her." The balloon release is open to the public and will be held at 7 p.m. at Southwood Christian Church in Greenville, at 1304 Jack Finney Boulevard. Louise Kinsler said she is hoping members of the public will come out to show their support, but is doubtful, given the attendance of previous years. "The newspaper here won't cover things like this," she said. "I have contacted them before and said, please publish a tiny article saying the public is invited, and they won't do it. So, nobody ever comes." For now, the Kinsler family's search for answers will continue. "It is a daily struggle," Louise Kinsler said. "I know it is a cold case, but I would like to see something done. I would like to have some answers. I would like to know where my daughter is. We love her and we miss her." Sara Kinsler would be 25 years old today. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5 feet 4 inches tall, 105 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her teeth were crooked and she had several ear piercings, a tattoo of the letter I on the inside of her ankle, a chicken pox scar on her left temple, and 2 chicken pox scars on her left cheek. There are 2 websites and a Facebook page devoted to the case. 5. Brian Hayes, Mark Dagnor. Brian disappeared from Paxson Middle School in Jacksonville, Florida on February 10, 2005. He and his best friend, Mark Dagnor, were both special education students at the school. The boys ran out of the building after an argument with a teacher at 1:15 p.m. and disappeared. Brian was apparently seen getting into a car outside the school. It is unclear whether Mark was with him at the time. They took no extra clothes, money, or other belongings with them, not even their book bags or Brian's coat. Police believed Brian and Mark had run away and were still in the local area. They had told friends of their plans to run away. A third boy was planning to go with them but did not. The day before they disappeared, school officials caught them trying to sneak away from the buses after school ended. Brian had run away from home before, but he never traveled more than a few miles from home, and was never gone for longer than a day. Mark has no history of runaway behavior. Both children were relatively new students at Paxson Middle School and unfamiliar with the area. Mark had moved there from Indiana and Brian from Port Orange, Florida. Brian was abused as a toddler and was eventually placed in foster care. He lived in several foster homes before being legally adopted by his grandparents. In October 2004, Brian's grandparents placed him in a therapeutic group home in Jacksonville in order to treat his behavioral problems. He was reportedly very happy at the facility. After weeks passed and no one had heard from Brian or Mark, and in light of the boys' medical problems, authorities announced that they were considered endangered and possibly met with foul play. They were last sighted together in Holly Hill, Florida, a town an hour and a half to 2 hours from Jacksonville, in April 2005. 2 people saw them there and the sightings were confirmed by police, but a search of the Holly Hill area afterwards turned up no sign of either of the children. Their cases remain unsolved and some agencies continue to classify them as runaways. 6. Kara Kaputski, 17 years old, headed off to school that morning but soon called her mom with a couple of requests. She needed her work uniform washed before 4 that afternoon and she'd forgotten a book. Rhonda Beckford threw the uniform in the washer and dropped off the book at the school office before heading to her own job. But when Beckford came home that afternoon, her husband, Jim Beckford, Kara's stepfather, asked if she'd heard from the teen. Kara had not come home from school at 2:30 as expected. "I tried to call her but it went straight to voicemail," Rhonda Beckford told me. She called Kara's manager at Popeye's Chicken where she worked. He hadn't heard from the teenager, either, and she'd only missed work once, and that was because she was sick. By 5 that afternoon, the Beckfords called the Belton police to report Kara missing. The first officer brushed it off, telling the family, "She's a teenager. She's probably just mad." The police, basically treated her as a runaway, Rhonda Beckford said. But who knows their child better than her parents? Kara had never run away before. She'd left most of her belongings at home, including cash, clothes and an iPod. And then there was the matter of the boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, as Kara had recently broken up with him. Rhonda Beckford told me he tried to abduct her a couple of weeks earlier and she had jumped out of his car. The teen had applied for a restraining order and a court date was set for May 10. Rhonda Beckford, her family and Kara's friends did their own investigating as they divided up the city of Belton, a suburb south of Kansas City, Mo, and went door to door with flyers. It wasn't until the June 2 disappearance of Kelsey Smith, an 18-year-old in Overland Park, Can, a suburb west of Kansas City, that Kara made the news. Suddenly there were two young women, both the same height, both with dark hair, missing in the Kansas City area. The national news came calling, Rhonda said. Could there be a connection? 4 days later, Smith's body was found and soon after her killer arrested. Although he was questioned, no link between the two cases was ever found. Surveillance tapes from cameras inside Belton High School show Kara leaving the morning of May 4, which doesn't surprise Rhonda Beckford, who knew her daughter had a couple of classes she hated and that she sometimes skipped. The school never called though, because at 17, Kara was considered an adult when it came to attendance. That has since changed. The school calls all parents of children enrolled in school when they're absent, and now surveillance cameras are placed outside the school as well. Cell phone records show that the last call on Kara's phone was with the ex-boyfriend that morning. It was 20 minutes long. Rhonda Beckford said circumstantial evidence would seem to point to the ex-boyfriend, but the Cass County prosecutor needs more than that to build a case. So Rhonda does what other parents of missing children do. They work to keep their child's face and name out there before the public, with websites, Facebook pages, t-shirts, signs, magnets, events and media coverage. Sunday was the 6th annual Walk to Honor Kara. Friends and family members showed up, but so did people who didn't even know her or her parents, like Terry and Tracy Jennings from Pleasant Hill, Mo. We drove over because we have 5 kids, they told me. Also present were the parents of other missing and murdered children, including Don and Donna Ross, parents of Jesse Ross, a 19-year-old who vanished during a school trip to Chicago, Jeremy Irwin and Deborah Bradley, parents of baby Lisa, who disappeared from their home in October 2011, Mark and Kim Howard, whose 11-year-old daughter Michaela was murdered June 17, 1998, and Greg and Missy Smith, parents of Kelsey. It was heartbreaking. I didn't realize there were so many cases, just in the Kansas City area alone. It's an epidemic, Rhonda said. If this, missing children, were a disease, there'd be $1 million in research to find a cure. Instead, there's $80,000 in reward money for anyone with information leading to Kara's discovery. Her mother isn't expecting to find her alive. She hates the word closure, preferring resolution. She just wants to know what happened. She wants to have a funeral so she can say goodbye to her daughter. She was robbed, Rhonda Beckford told me, while we walked together Sunday, of the lifetime of memories I should have had with Kara. Meanwhile, Rhonda and Jim hope that someone, somewhere, will come forward to share information. Someone knows something. You just keep on keeping on, Jim Beckford said. Kara lived with her mother, stepfather and younger brother at the time of her disappearance. Her parents are divorced and her father lived in a nearby town. She was occasionally truant from school in 2007. Authorities stated there is no evidence of foul play in Kara's case, but they do not believe she ran away from home. Her case remains unsolved. 7. Alexis Paterson. Alexis resided with her mother and stepfather, Ayanna and Lauren Bourgeois, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Lauren walked Alexis to High Mount Boulevard School in the 4920 block of West Garfield Avenue near 49th Street at approximately 8 a.m. on May 3, 2002. Alexis was a first-grade student there. The school is less than 1 block from the family's home. Lauren said that he watched Alexis walk towards the playground before he headed back to their residence. Alexis never attended classes during the day, although students reported seeing her crying on the playground before and after school. She has never been heard from again. Ayanna and Lauren were not notified about Alexis's absence until after her school dismissed in the afternoon. They initially believed she refused to attend classes because of an argument she had with her mother. Ayanna said that Alexis failed to properly complete her homework during the previous evening, She was not allowed to bring cupcakes for her classmates the following day as a result. Authorities agreed with the scenario and said that something may caused Alexis's disappearance after she was seen in the school's playground later in the day. She does not have a history as a runaway and had a perfect attendance record at school prior to her disappearance. The surrounding areas were searched immediately after Alexis was reported missing. Investigators canvassed nearby Washington Park while divers searched its lagoon. Authorities focused on areas near Meineke Avenue, Vine Street, 16th Street and 60th Street in the northwest section of the city. No evidence was discovered at any of the locations. Investigators announced that Alexis disappeared under suspicious circumstances and reclassified her case from a missing child to a criminal investigation by May 14. Some of Alexis's classmates told police that they had seen a red truck parked near the school for most of the week before her disappearance. The truck never dropped anyone off or picked anyone up and it disappeared after Alexis vanished, never to be seen again. It has not been identified and it is unknown if it is connected to Alexis's case. Alexis's father, Kenya Campbell, was imprisoned in Milwaukee at the time of her disappearance. He was released shortly afterwards and cooperated with authorities, as did Diana and Lauren. Their photos are posted below this case summary. Alexis's stepfather has a criminal history as well, but investigators announced that they did not believe either Lauren nor Campbell's pasts were connected to her case. Lauren failed a polygraph test after Alexis's disappearance and was charged for an unrelated crime in 2003, a year after Alexis's vanished. He had a domestic dispute with Diana, who had been trying to leave him for some time, and was ordered to stay away from her. Diana says Lauren was abusive and threatening towards her. The criminal charges were later dropped, however. Diana and Lauren have since separated and moved away from the Milwaukee area. An anonymous caller contacted a Milwaukee television station in August 2002, and claimed that Alexis's remains were disposed in the Milwaukee River near Estabrook Park. Dive teams searched the area, but no evidence related to Alexis's disappearance was discovered. Investigators announced that foul play was suspected in her case in September 2002. They searched a vacant house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on a tip from a prisoner in 2005, but turned up nothing. Alexis's disappearance remains unsolved. 8. Carrie Saig. Carrie was last seen in the playground area of the Albert Einstein Hebrew Day School in the 1600 block of East Oakley Boulevard in Las Vegas, Nevada on October 25, 1978. Saig's classmates told authorities that he entered an unidentified vehicle on the school's property during their lunchtime recess. Carrie has never been heard from again. Carrie's father, Saul Saig, and mother, Marilyn Saig, received a ransom call from a male individual 3 hours after his son disappeared. The man demanded $500,000 for Carrie's return, then claimed he would call again in 2 days with instructions as to how the ransom should be paid. The individual never contacted the family again. Authorities quickly ruled out all of Carrie's family members as suspects in his case. They believed one of Carrie's father's former employees was responsible for his son's disappearance and the ransom call. Gerald Howard Jerry Burgess was eventually convicted of the sexual assault on a woman at the Albert Einstein Hebrew Day School. The attack had taken place the week before Saig vanished from the same locale. Several of Carrie's classmates identified Burgess as the man driving the vehicle Carrie entered the day of his disappearance. Burgess said he was there, but only to deliver a lunch to his girlfriend's son who was a friend of Carrie's. Other witnesses identified Burgess's voice as that of the ransom caller. He told investigators the location of one of Saig's shoes off Mojave Road in Las Vegas, but claimed that the child's abductors gave him the information when he acted as a go-between with them and Carrie's family. Burgess maintained his innocence in Carrie's case. In 1982, Burgess was charged with kidnapping Carrie. He claimed that he believed Carrie was alive and residing in Israel after his trial, but he failed to provide evidence to support his statement. A jury acquitted him of all charges, citing a lack of evidence implicating him. Burgess was arrested in October 2000, after he sold an illegal weapon to an undercover agent. As a convicted felon, he is legally forbidden to possess any kind of firearm or ammunition. During the preceding 18-month investigation into his criminal activities, Burgess also allegedly offered to dispose of a body near the location of Carrie's supposed grave. Burgess claimed that he could weld the body into a steel drum, and reportedly said he had killed Carey and disposed of his remains in that way in 1978. Burgess rented welding equipment several days before Carey disappeared. He has not faced additional charges in Carey's case, but he was convicted of the firearms charges and sentenced to 11 years in prison. Carey's father, Saul Saig, was under indictment for conspiracy to bribe a public official at the time Carey disappeared. Prosecutors dropped the charges against him after Carey's abduction, but his alleged co-conspirators were convicted. Saul owned a successful carpet business at the time of his son's abduction. He sold it in the 1990s, and amassed $7.2 million in gambling debts to local casinos. Facing serious criminal charges from bounced checks, Saul fled from the United States to Israel in 1999. He eventually returned and reached a settlement with the casinos, and the criminal complaints against him were dropped. Saul has since divorced from Marilyn, and still lives in Las Vegas. Authorities said that they received a tip that Carey was living in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1990s. His case was reopened in 1999. Investigators continue to believe that he was the victim of foul play and are still searching for his remains. Burgess remains the prime suspect in Carey's disappearance. His abduction is unsolved. 9. Kiplyn Davis. Kiplyn was last seen at Spanish Fork High School in her hometown of Spanish Fork, Utah on May 2, 1995. She was a sophomore at the school at the time. Kiplyn attended her early driver's education class and her regular morning classes and ate lunch with her friends, but did not show up for her 4th and 5th period classes after lunch. There were possible sightings of Kiplyn in a vehicle on Main Street in Spanish Fork shortly after she was last seen in school, but these have not been confirmed. All of her personal belongings, including her purse, makeup, dental retainer and school books, were left in her locker at school and she never returned home for the day. Kiplyn's family resided 8 blocks from her school. She was reported missing when she failed to arrive home by 5 p.m. She has never been heard from again. Kiplyn's disappearance was initially investigated as a runaway case, due to her age and the fact that she had had an argument with her family about school shortly before she disappeared. However, her parents say it is out of character for her to leave without warning. She was happy with her life at the time of her disappearance. She was about to get her driver's license and her older sister was getting married. After months passed with Kiplyn's return or any clues as to her whereabouts, police began to suspect foul play in her disappearance. Her family believed she was murdered. After her disappearance there were rumors that her body was buried in a local canyon, but her remains were never found. 4 years after her disappearance, her family held a memorial service for Kiplyn, and put up a marker in her name at the Spanish Fork City Cemetery. They are still searching for her, however. Numerous indictments were made in Kiplyn's case in 2005. In April, Scott Brenson was charged with perjury and lying to a federal agent. In August, Gary Von Blackmore was also charged with perjury and lying to a federal agent. In September, Timmy Brent Olson was charged with 15 counts of lying to a grand jury. In October, Christopher Neil Jepson was charged with perjury before a grand jury and making false statements to an FBI agent. In November, David Rucker Lifeson was charged with perjury. Olson, Jepson, Brunson and Lifeson were all students at Spanish Fork High School when Kiplyn disappeared, but Blackmore did not attend the school and did not know her. Several of the men have criminal histories. Photographs of all of them are posted below this case summary. Olson, Jepson, Brunson and Lifeson were all members of the high school's drama club, and they stated they were hanging lights in the school auditorium in preparation for an upcoming performance on the day Kiplyn disappeared. However, a community choir performed in the auditorium during the time the defendants said they were there, and none of the choir members saw any of them. In December 2005, Brunson struck a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to 6 counts of making false statements to an FBI agent and grand jury. The following January, Blackmore struck a similar plea bargain and served 13 months in prison. Olson's perjury trial was conducted in the summer of 2006. He presented no defense and was convicted on all charges. He was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. This is a longer sentence than is recommended by federal guidelines, although much shorter than what the prosecutor requested. The judge took Kiplyn's presumed murder into account as a factor in sentencing. In September 2007, Jepson was convicted of 4 counts of perjury at a jury trial. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In October 2007, Ellison pleaded guilty to a single count of perjury, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Blackmore pleaded guilty to 2 more counts of perjury in 2011, and was sentenced to 36 months of probation, at the request of both the prosecution and the defense. He stated the court case had turned his life around and he had gotten off drugs, gotten married and was holding down a job. Authorities believe Kiplyn was raped and murdered, and several people who knew her or knew her associates are covering up the crime. They believe Ellison and Ellison were responsible for her presumed death, and the other men manufactured an alibi for them so that they might avoid detection. After Blackmore's guilty plea to perjury, Ellison was charged with first-degree murder in connection with Kiplyn's presumed death. Jepson was charged with Kiplyn's murder in October 2007. In May 2009, a month before his trial was scheduled, he reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. He pleaded no contest to obstruction of justice, and the prosecution agreed he could no longer be charged in connection with Kiplyn's disappearance and presumed death. He maintains complete innocence in Kiplyn's case, and signed an affidavit saying he was not involved in her abduction and doesn't know what happened to her. In February 2011, a month before his murder trial was supposed to begin, Ellison pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in Kiplyn's case. He was sentenced to a term of 1 to 15 years in prison, rather than the life sentence he would have gotten if he'd been convicted of murder. Through his attorney, Ellison stated he witnessed another person hit Kiplyn twice in the head with a softball-sized rock. He and that person moved her body under some trees in Spanish Fork Canyon, then that night moved it elsewhere. He didn't name his accomplice, but he did say the accomplice was one of the 3 other suspects who'd already pleaded guilty to perjury. Kiplyn's father offered several times to advocate for Ellison if he would reveal the whereabouts of Kiplyn's body, but Ellison refused to do so even at his sentencing. Kiplyn has never been located. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Suspected. 10. Kyron Horman. Kyron was last seen in Portland, Oregon on June 4, 2010. He usually rode the bus to Skyline Elementary School, where he was a 2nd grader. The school is in the 11,500 block of Skyline Boulevard in a rural area in northwest Portland. About 2 miles from Kyron's home in the 15,700 block of Sheltered Nook Road. His stepmother, Terry Lynn Moulton Horman, stated she drove him to school because there was a science fair that day, and Kyron wanted to set up his exhibit, a display about the red-eyed tree frog. They arrived shortly after 8 a.m. and dropped Kyron's coat and backpack off at his classroom. A witness saw Terry and Kyron together at 8:15 p.m. in front of Kyron's exhibit. The bell rang at 8:45 a.m. and Terry says she left then. She said Kyron told her he was going to his classroom. He has never been heard from again. Terry reported Kyron missing at 3:45 p.m., after he failed to arrive home at 3:30 p.m. as scheduled. No one reported having seen Kyron at the school after the 8:45 bell. His teacher marked him absent after classes began at 10 a.m. She thought he was at a doctor's appointment. Because so many hours had passed since he was last seen, police launched an extensive search immediately. Over the next few days they interviewed all the students and staff at Skyline Elementary School, and searched the school, school grounds and the surrounding area. It was one of the largest searches in Oregon history. Kyron's loved ones described him as timid and stated he would be unlikely to leave the school and go off on his own. Kyron's parents, Kane Andrew Horman and Desiree Young, have been divorced since 2003. Terry and Kane married in 2007. But they had been together for several years before that. Terry raised Kyron from infancy, although he did visit with Desiree and his stepfather, Tony Young, every couple of weeks. Kane and Terry had a 1-year-old daughter, Kyara Ariel Horman, at the time of Kyron's disappearance, and Terry has a teenage son from a previous marriage who was living with her parents in June 2010. Photos of Kane, Terry and Desiree are posted below this case summary. Less than 2 weeks after Kyron's disappearance, police stopped the search and announced they had upgraded his case from a simple missing child to a criminal investigation. At the same time, they stated they didn't think Kyron had been abducted by a stranger. They focused on Terry, stating cellular phone records indicated she wasn't where she said she was on the day of her stepson's disappearance. 3 weeks after Kyron's disappearance, on June 26, Kane moved out of the family home. That same day, Terry placed 2 911 calls from their residence. The first one, at 5:17 p.m., was classified as a threats call, and the second, at 11:39 p.m., was classified as a child custody call. Kane wasn't home when either call was placed. During the following days, the police released more information to the public. A landscaper who worked for the Horman family had told investigators that about 6 or 7 months before Kyron disappeared, Terry offered him money to kill her husband. When authorities notified Kane of this, the news prompted him to take Kyra and move out. The police attempted a sting, bringing the landscaper to Terry's door to demand money while undercover agents watched from nearby. But Terry called 911 instead to say someone was demanding $10,000 from her. Kane filed for divorce and a restraining order from Terry, saying he and the police believed she was responsible for Kyron's disappearance in addition to the attempted murder for hire. A judge barred Terry from contacting Kane, Kyron, Kyra or her own teenage son. Kane sought custody of Kyra and child support from Terry. He accused Terry of attempting to abduct Kyra from her daycare 2 days after the restraining order was granted, of beginning an affair with another man 4 days after Kane moved out, and of sharing sensitive information, including Kane's new address, with the man. In mid-July, Terry moved to her hometown of Roseburg, Oregon, and Kane and Kyra moved back into their Portland house. Investigators questioned Terry's friend, Dida Spitzer, about her possible knowledge of Kyron's disappearance. They searched her home and asked the public if they had seen Terry, her white pickup truck or Spitzer on June 4 between 9:45 a.m. and 1 p.m. Spitzer stated knew nothing about Kyron's disappearance and she believed Terry was innocent of any wrongdoing. Kane stated Terry suffered from postpartum depression after Kyra's birth and her behavior changed. In court documents, he claimed she is an alcoholic, has a personality disorder and is severely emotionally disturbed. Kane said he believed Kyra was not safe with her mother and may have witnessed whatever happened to Kyron on the day he disappeared. Some of Terry's acquaintances reported that she was angry with Kane for making her teenage son move out of their home, which he did in February 2010, 4 months before Kyron's disappearance. Desiree told reporters that she had attempted to get custody of Kyron prior to his disappearance and that Kyron had told her several times that he wanted to come live with her. In May 2012, Desiree filed a lawsuit against Terry, accusing her of kidnapping Kyron and seeking $10 million in damages. She has asked the court to order Terry to return Kyron, or say where his body is. The Hormans' divorce is pending. Authorities have yet to name a suspect in Kyron's disappearance. In spite of their focus on his stepmother, Kane speculated Terry caused the child's disappearance in an effort to hurt him, and suggested she may have had help from other individuals. Both of Kyron's parents continue to hope that he is alive. His case remains unsolved.